On this episode of the Challenge All-Stars, she's back. I'm Lizzie Frizzle, and welcome to the Recap Corner. Today, we're talking about Season 3, Episode 4, titled She's Back, in reference to a new challenger who joins the cast. Before we get into the episode, I want to say thank you to everyone who watched last week's Recap Corner. I've never had a video reach triple-digit views before. I've never even gotten close to that, and it was really exciting. So whether you watched the whole video or whether you clicked on the thumbnail and then immediately clicked away, thank you so much. In this episode, some storylines that have been really important so far, namely the Yes-Wes rivalry, take a backseat to make room for new narratives. Treehouse plays an even bigger role despite losing 2 members last episode. The new challenger stirs the pot. Strategic tension escalates between Brad and MJ. And the sexual tension between Jordan and Nia finally actualizes in one of the most graphic hookup scenes I can remember seeing on reality television in a while. But more than anything, this episode focuses on the 2 contestants that get eliminated at the end of it. We really understand exactly what leads to both of their downfalls. Spoiler alert, it's Kendall and Darrell. For Kendall, it's about her inability to play the strategic and social games, which are often linked. The Treehouse is still vigorously targeting her, especially Kayla, who's on a mission to eliminate all other duos from the game except her and Sylvia. Kendall is unable to mend fences with Jonna and MJ after she sabotaged MJ during last episode's challenge. And Kendall and Kellyanne are not proactive in trying to build numbers to work against the Treehouse. Nia gives an interesting interview, and I know the idea of Nia getting any amount of interview or confessional time is hard to believe, but stay with me. Nia gives this interview where she talks about the fact that none of the non-Treehouse women, herself, Kendall, Kellyanne, Jonna, none of them have even talked about the idea of aligning in opposition to Treehouse, which really just drives home the idea that Treehouse is playing that much harder than everyone else in the cast. And I think that's so funny because, at least from the footage we've seen so far, Treehouse doesn't appear to be playing any harder than any other regular challenge alliance. And yet, Kendall is so put off by their gameplay, she asks how they can sleep at night, like she's the Office film crew talking to Angela.
I have a nice comforter and several cozy pillows. I usually read a chapter of a book and it's lights out by 8:30. That's how I sleep at night.
For Darrell, his downfall is more about his physical gameplay or his performances in the challenges. Specifically, it all comes down to his famed fear of heights, a fear that's already come up in an earlier challenge from this season. Prior to the challenge in this episode, we see several cast members teasing Darrell about his fear of heights, and from the moment that scene happened, I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach about how Darrell would do at the challenge. But before we can talk about what that challenge entails, we have to talk about the replacement cast member. It's Beth. She's brought in after Melinda, Tina, and Jemmye all have to leave without being eliminated. As soon as I saw the episode title, "She's Back," with an exclamation point, my first thought was, oh, it's gotta be Beth. And I don't really know why. Maybe she said that about herself, like, I'm back, or somebody said she's back in reference to Beth in an earlier season. and it's like buried in my brain too far back for me to remember, but not far back enough that I've totally forgotten. Or maybe it's that she's back with the exclamation point just, I don't know, evoked something menacing to me. It felt like an ominous title, and there is no more menacing cast member than Beth. Admittedly, I was a little disappointed when Beth was revealed as the replacement cast member. Nothing against her, it's just that now that All Stars is kind of in full swing, there are so many women I'd love to see on the show, and we did already see Beth in All Stars 1. At the same time, there are a few cast members this season that I'm really excited to watch Beth specifically interact with. It is too bad that she just missed seeing Cyrus, but at least her tenderoni, Nehemiah, is still around, even if he wants nothing to do with her this season. There's also Veronica, who has a long history of arguing with Beth, a history that is so close to being continued in this episode. It's also too bad that we missed Beth and Tina interacting, but at least that probably spares us the footage of Tina punching Beth on the duel, which for some reason is a clip the challenge loves to bring out for any occasion. So, Beth is in the cast now. She arrives just in time to participate, or not, but we'll get there, in the challenge, which is called High Stakes. The first thing that happens is TJ tells everyone to group themselves up into trios. Some people, like Brad, Wes, and Nehemiah, group up with all friends, while others, like Kayla and Sylvia, make sure to group up with a rival, in this case, Kellyanne, in anticipation of needing to compete against the people in their trio. Now that everyone's trioed up, we learn what the actual challenge is. 150 feet in the air, 3 planks extend off a skyscraper's roof. Beyond each plank is a simple math equation that can be solved by lining up spinning blocks in the right order. The first player in each heat to solve their equation wins the round and gets to choose the order in which the other 2 players in the round fall off the planks and take an involuntary bungee back down to the ground. The winners of each round form the authority, and the man and woman within the authority who solve their equations the fastest are the overall winners. The last place man and woman, the 2 who will go straight into elimination, are the people who were dropped first by the male and female overall winners. Sound confusing? 'Cause it is kind of. I had to re-listen to the rules a couple of times to get what was going on. And even after that, to be perfectly honest, I didn't understand until after the challenge was over. Of the challenges we've seen so far this season, High Stakes is probably my least favorite. I don't love the format. Having to go into elimination is a big deal, and it feels like there's no agency for the last place people. They just happen to be in the same group with the people who went the fastest. I was prepared to complain about this for a lot longer, but I don't have to because 2 players decide not to do the challenge, therefore making the entire last place system irrelevant. Before the challenge can begin, we must sabotage. Once again, the sabotage is a 1-minute time penalty, which feels way more consequential this time than it did the first time a 1-minute time penalty was the sabotage, so I don't mind it. Kayla sabotages Kendall, which is not surprising, and Brad sabotages MJ, which could have been surprising but wasn't because MJ's interviews totally gave away the fact that it was going to happen. In MJ's defense, he does make a really good point during those interviews about the nature of the sabotage. He believes that having already been sabotaged once in the last episode, his chances of getting sabotaged again are a lot higher because people will just do the thing that's already been done. And honestly, I think he's completely right. A lot of reality shows, The Challenge especially, follow that format, intentionally or otherwise. It's just the way things go. So once all is said and done, and all the math is solved, the authority turns out to be Kayla, John, Veronica, Mark, MJ with his sabotage, and Brad. The overall winners are Kayla and Brad. Once again, very impressed with the group. John, Kayla, and Brad are all making their third consecutive appearance in the authority, and Kayla and Brad have both been the overall winners in back-to-back challenges. Veronica was also particularly impressive in this challenge because she was really too short to use the mechanism the way it was set up. Everyone has no problem spinning the blocks, and Veronica is on her tippy toes on this little plank 150 feet in the air spinning these blocks. And she still got in the authority. As somebody who is 5'2", I was very inspired. As for the quitters, aka the last place players that'll go straight into the arena, it's Darrell and Beth. Darrell is my favorite person to ever be on the challenge, so I was really disappointed. I know he's got this famous fear of heights like we talked about earlier, but usually he just gives a funny interview about it and then does okay in the challenge anyway. Not this time, though. I think it was even more irritating to watch Beth quit, though, only because she just got there. This was her first challenge of the season, and she refused to do it. Sylvia is also this close to quitting, but she does end up completing the challenge. When she's panicking, though, TJ's trying to calm her down, and it's my favorite moment of the whole episode. He says, "Sylvia, it's not the fall that'll kill you. It's the sudden stop at the end." And I just can't think of a less comforting thing to say to a person who's afraid.
Not the fall that kills you. It's the sudden stop at the end. That's the only bad part.
After the challenge, an uneventful evening ensues. The cast goes to their regular bar hangout, where we do get to check in on my favorite alliance of the season, Kellyanne and this dog. Like the nighttime scene, the authorities' deliberation the next day is pretty uneventful and goes as expected based on all the conversations we'd heard throughout the episode. Kendall and Jordan are both voted into the arena, seemingly without much debate. Even if the vote was predictable, there were a couple lines of dialogue I thought were worth noting. The first is MJ's belief that Wes would target him if Wes were in the authority. That stuck out to me partly because just an episode or two ago, we saw MJ wanting to softly align with Wes, and partly because so far, the only person we've seen Wes really seriously target is Yes. So I'm curious where MJ's fear is coming from. The other line of interest was Veronica saying that of all the people in the cast, the only two that she doesn't want to win at the end are Wes and Jordan. Why? And why not Beth? As the cast walks into the arena, I start getting really nervous. I noticed that Darrell has had way more interviews than most of the rest of the cast, which is almost never a good sign for someone who's about to go into elimination. And he's got to compete against Jordan. On the other hand, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little excited to see Jordan compete in an elimination. He's one of the most exciting ones to watch. The elimination game is called Steamroller. Players start on a platform inside a divided steel barrel. By pushing on opposite sides of the barrel, players try to move it toward their side of the platform. First player to successfully move the barrel to their side of the platform wins. The women compete first, Beth versus Kendall. And because there's a significant size and weight factor to this elimination, Beth wins kind of pretty easily. In an interview, Veronica says that the reason they voted Kendall into the arena was because they thought she'd be able to beat Beth and send her home. To me, this was a really surprising reveal that kind of came out of nowhere. Treehouse was already targeting Kendall last week. They voted her into the arena then, too. So I assumed this vote was just more of the same. And also, why would Kendall be a good opponent for Beth in an elimination? They're totally mismatched size-wise. And yes, not every elimination in challenge history is size or weight-based, but in a lot of them, being the bigger person is inherently an advantage. If Treehouse or if Veronica wanted Beth to go home, then wouldn't Naya instead of Kendall be the obvious opponent? Naya's a lot closer to Beth size-wise, and she's also not a member of Treehouse. Anyway, it's definitely disappointing to see Kendall go home again without making the final. I really want to see her compete in a final. Unfortunately, I think it's going to take some major strategic overhauling for her to get there. And after appearing on the first 3 All-Stars seasons, I'm not sure when we'll see her again. I can't imagine them casting people 4 times in a row. The men compete second. As they're setting up the equipment, I suddenly remember the footage from the trailer for this episode of someone leaving the arena in a stretcher. And since the women have already competed and that didn't happen, I now know that either Darrell or Jordan is going to leave this elimination in a stretcher. And given the interview count and the content of those interviews and the general vibe of this episode, it's not going to be Jordan. However, I am very good at convincing myself of things I want to be true. I already did it earlier this season when I convinced myself that Cyrus was going to make the final. So I went into this men's heat wholeheartedly, half-heartedly, thinking that somehow Darrell was going to win. Initially, it does seem like Darrell is going to win. He immediately pushes the cage within inches of the marker he needed to hit for him to have officially won. But he just can't get those last few inches, and that is all the opening someone like Jordan needs. I'm not sure how he does it, but Jordan manages to find a position in the cage that if he just holds it, Darrell cannot advance. Jordan can't advance either because he's playing defense, but he holds Darrell off from moving literally inches. From there, he adopts the Christian from Survivor David versus Goliath method of just talking, just chattering away for as long as he needs to. And you know what? Some of what he says actually manages to be pretty funny.
Darrell, how much you weigh? 150. You liar.
Who wants it more?
We don't want it. Stop saying that.
Cut to an hour later. The cage hasn't moved much. Darrell is still really close to winning, but Jordan is still holding his position and seems like he has energy for hours. Out of nowhere, Darrell climbs out of the cage, essentially quitting the elimination, and collapses to the ground. Jordan rolls the cage across the platform. He wins. Darrell gets taken away in the stretcher. We don't hear exactly what happens to him, but TJ says he's fine, and I follow him on social media, so I too can attest to the fact that he is fine. Obviously, this is a shocking way for Darrell to go home. He is one of the legends of the challenge, one of the best competitors ever. Even when he got booted first in Dirty 30 or in Fresh Meat 2, it didn't feel quite like this elimination. The worst part is, on his way out in his goodbye interview, Darrell says we'll probably see him on another challenge. And that's just not good enough for me. There's some really funny editing in this episode, all using back-to-back juxtaposing dialogue. There's Mark and Yes talking about their experience with math.
Oh, I don't know about this one. Back in college, I chose not to go heavy on math. I'm scared.
I just love math. I think in math, I think in logic. It doesn't mean I'm gonna get it, but I do enjoy it. I'd probably pay $100 to do this.
There's MJ and Kendall talking about Beth's arrival.
Ethically, Beth does some really weird stuff.
I feel like I am in a drought in the desert, and Beth is the water that is coming to me.
And finally, my personal favorite, there's Jordan talking about how he trains harder than everyone else, physically, mentally, whatever, just trains harder, only to lose the challenge to a sabotaged MJ.
I train in my everyday life harder than most of these players will ever go on a challenge, and that sets me apart.
MJ, go. Check. That's not correct.
Check.
That's correct. Good job. Later, Jordan.
On the other, unfunnier hand, as impressively as Kayla is performing this season, I'm ready for her to evolve beyond constantly making jokes about her castmates being old. When Mark first pitched the idea of All-Stars, the whole cast being old was kind of the whole point. Admittedly, I thought this episode was the most boring of the 4 we've seen so far this season, but the trailer for the next episode looks awesome. There's going to be some kind of twist at the start of the next challenge that may or may not spur Wes into cooking up some crazy Wesian scheme. And then, during a nighttime scene, we see Beth start a rumor that Janae and MJ are having an affair. Truthfully, I've seen this rumor about Janae cheating on her husband with MJ online already, but I'm shocked that it made its way into the edited show. Am I excited to see that drama unfold in the next episode? Yes. Do I feel guilty about it? Absolutely. Thanks for watching. You can come back next Tuesday for more Challenge All-Stars recaps. And in the meantime, if you're so inclined, please like and subscribe. Thanks again. Bye.
You know, Beth.